So I apply this three-part approach to psychology, partly because it makes sense, partly because more is too much and less is too little. But the 3 points are your reason, your reasons, your perceptions. That's one. And the second is your emotions, how you feel about things, which we overlook and feel that, we'll be reasonable about things, but we're not. The emotions are rooted deeply. It's like taking dandelions out of your lawn. You're never going to get rid of them all. You're not going to, prevail. And the third thing is the neurology, which is your habitual reactivity to things. And that's what brain training is about. It's about basically relaxing your triggers, which are not entirely emotional or intellectual. They are sort of built into your neurology.
This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. Lincoln, welcome to the show. I am excited to talk to you. I think I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while because I have not had the opportunity to really sit and talk with someone who's done a variety of things that on the surface seem a little bit disparate, but I think they kind of layer on top of each other to get us to where you are and what you do today. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, let's see if you're right.
So I think we'll start by saying, we met by there's for the podcast world out there are different platforms that you can be a member of, and the goal is to find interesting people to match up with shows, and there's this kind of give and take, and sometimes happenstance, and sometimes the matches are based on just common likes. And when I saw your name come through, in the big subject line, it has clinical counselor, hypnotherapist, experience in physics, software, consulting, neurology, brain training, sleep, dreams, and altered states. Big group of things. And so I thought, wow, well, that's a lot to kind of boil down into a show. So let's kind of think about some of these components and how they fit together. And I really would like to talk a lot about what it is that you do today, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things you did in the past, just so we can see, to your point, if I'm right about them layering together. So why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about what you do today, and the work that you're doing with individuals from a counseling perspective.
It seems to resonate with the idea of altered states, which is one of the unifying ideas in my experience. And people come to me, with a kind of a trio of possibilities. Either they're upset about something. Well, they're usually upset about something. It could be about their own, balance or imbalance. Or it could be about other people's struggles that enter into their lives. So they could be a high performance person who's frustrated by their, low performance environment, or the need to struggle with clients and bosses and situations that don't support their level of performance. Frustrating. Or it could be a person who's suffering from a situation that's got the better of them. A relationship problem could be personal, could be work-related, family-related. They're all kind of similar. They get you down. They undermine your sense of self. And, they could be social. All too, right? Racial, religious, cultural prejudice and stuff like that. But all the stuff feeds into each other. It layers. So, It's interesting that one of the things I did was fly sailplanes, which are kind of an aggressive form of flying because they don't have an engine, which means every time you land, it's considered an emergency because you can't go around. So it's interesting, though, just to skip the details, when problems arise in that situation and in others, it's usually because of a series of miscalculations.
Mm.
You know, it's like in a relationship, I said this, but I meant that, and they took it the wrong way, and then they did this, and I don't understand that, and before you know it, we're off the rails and going in different directions. And in a physical situation like flying an airplane or even driving a car, a couple of mistakes like that, and you're in a touchy situation, to put it
Yeah.
mildly. So I deal with people who, are in situations like that. Something's gotten off, something's become unscrewed, and there are too many loose nuts flying around. And it's actually, I'm starting to think, not that hard to help people if their problems are obvious. In
Mm.
some sense, all you need to do is encourage them and give them, fortify them, give them confidence and I don't like the word hope because it sort of means it's not based on anything, but hope based on something, like
Yeah.
realism. And what I do is put a lot of faith on honesty and directness and authenticity and sort of help orient people to those ideas and cheerlead them to, wait for the good things that come to people who are honest and have integrity and sense of value. And also to, very importantly, discard the negative because
Mm.
you get built, your negative sort of gets built into you. Certainly, a lot of people come with family problems. There are not very many great parents in the world. A lot of parents became parents. There's no instruction manual, like they say.
Right. Right.
And if there was, it would be thousands of pages long, and nobody would read it. So a lot of parents do badly. Not to say some of them mean badly. That's, there's some people who are kind of really shouldn't be parents. But there's so many mistakes you can make because kids are so sensitive and they're so malleable and their environments are not particularly supportive most of the time. So I get a lot of people with old baggage and the question of what to release and if you can release, which you can't really when it comes to your parents and family.
Huh.
Quite a lot of people sort of are estranged from their family, which is sort of sad, but even I am somewhat estranged from my family just because they live on the East Coast and I live on the West Coast. And
Mm.
I wish I talked to them more, but they seem to be living their lives in, a little microscopic spotlight of their neighborhood. And I guess one thing I'd say, just coming out of left field, is I try to preserve all my relationships. I don't think important relationships ever end. And I'm always sorry to see them go, which they seem to do. So that's what I'm doing. I'm talking to people in that kind of existential way to encourage them to be deep and emotionally, I would say, balanced, but also powerful, faith in yourself. And that seems to do a lot of it.
It's the work that you're doing now. It seems so very important, but it also seems like it's a lot different than having a PhD in physics. How did you go from studying physics to counseling people and working with them around preserving or maintaining their interpersonal relationships?
I guess that's I agree with you. It's an odd step. But I would say one of the answers is that, I was attracted to physics because it offered answers.
Mm.
And I, for some reason, thought they would be useful answers. That's not true. They're not particularly useful for
No.
personal matters. But I actually learned quite a bit of personal dynamics because physics is a kind of courtly art. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of money, prestige, there's a pecking order, there's, who talks to whom and who publishes where. There's a lot of ego. That's why I say courtly. Lies in a court. A lot of layers, a lot of hierarchies. Who's got tenure? Who's a assistant? Who's all this stuff? Who's a student? And it's pretty ugly. I thought at the time when I was a graduate student that all the other graduate programs were equally ugly, but it turns out, from what I hear, they weren't. They were more humane, more socially aware. But physics, as one of the hard sciences, is not very humane or socially aware. So I learned about humanity and social awareness. And
Fair.
right, and I learned I didn't like being there, and I didn't like quite a few of those people and their attitudes, which you wouldn't like either. I mean, they were pretty hostile and deprecating. This is like graduate school. I remember a story from graduate school in Berkeley, California, when the incoming students were told to look to their left and look to their right, and that, the next year, those two people would be gone. That was the purpose of the introductory year of graduate school, was to eliminate 2/3 of the candidates. And,
Unreal.
Just think of that in social terms. It's ugly. Anyway, and that was typical, I'd say. Anyway, so if that doesn't motivate you to go into a more humane area, truly, right?
Fair.
But it's still a strange step, because I was interested in physics and I did good work, but I didn't make the kind of political connections you'd want to continue, and I didn't like the options there. And now I look back, it was quite a long time ago, 40 years ago, and now I look back on the people who I was, who I looked to the left and looked to the right. I mean, I made it through the program, but I'd stopped after that. So now I look to the left and right at what those people are now doing, and I'm glad I'm not one of them. I don't like what they're doing, particularly, or the circles they're in, or the opportunities they've had. But, you look at my background, and it's, very broad. And if you become a specialist, then you probably don't have a broad background, because you're a specialist. You're in ophthalmology, or is it optometry?
It's optometry, yeah.
So, what if you were interested in cardiology or pulmonology or rheumatology?
Yeah.
It's like, you could say at some point they're all related, but at another point of view from our specialist society, you're not going to be given credit in the other fields outside your specialty unless you work really hard and make a very special identity for yourself.
Well, that's true.
So,
And that's probably that's an interesting way to
and
think
is that
about it.
fair? Is that, that,
Yeah.
maybe
That's
eyes
fair.
are different, but most organs in your body are very connected to other organs. And it's certainly like heart and lung, very hard to tell the two apart. They work together. And so why is there a cardiologist and a pulmonologist, and they don't talk to each other, and they publish in different journals? It's frustrating as a patient. So I had COVID, and COVID injured my lungs, and the pulmonologist had nothing useful to say about rehabilitating my lungs. And I was very disappointed with them. They gave me the test. They said, "You look great." And I said, "I feel, not perfect. And they said, so it's going to be the rest of your life. Good luck. Goodbye. And I thought, that's not enough for me. Anyway, so here you are, getting out of physics. And I don't know how I got into therapy, mostly by just asking these questions and trying to get answers. And I find my clients help me quite a bit in getting answers.
Well, that part is interesting to me in that, if I'm thinking about physics, which I only dealt with physics for as much as I had to get to the next step, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of asking questions and getting answers, and like anything scientific, there's kind of a methodology you use to get to your endpoint or your somewhat endpoint, and I think that is similar to maybe the way you think about approaching helping people from a therapy perspective or a counseling perspective, right? Because you're helping them put together the puzzle pieces, and you're taking them through something rather methodical to get to a point, which may not be the end point, but a point, right? And so there is some basis there. What I think is different is, I don't think of physics as an example as something that you go into because you really want to help people.
Right.
And I really do think that you go into therapy, being a hypnotherapist or a clinical counselor, because you do want to help people. And those two things are the two pieces that I think are a little bit farther apart for me.
Well, I can resolve that somewhat because I don't particularly want to help people. It's a difficult and somewhat fraught position to take. First of all, I'm mostly curious about people. I want to understand how they think, and somewhat from a selfish perspective, so that it helps me understand how to think, helps me understand other people, helps me understand my own world, my troubles in my world, troubles I have with people or society, and so forth. But also, there's a problem in wanting to help people, is that the problem is who defines what help is going to be. I mean, here you've got somebody coming to you with what's probably a misconception. And what they normally want you to do is to help them resolve the difficulty so that they can continue with their misconception. It's somebody else's fault. There's nothing wrong with me. And if that's what they want help with, are you really helping them when you substantiate their misconception and give them hope that they will change their parents, or their estranged partner will come back to them, or, so who defines what it is to help? I do get reward when I feel a person has been helped, but then again, they have to say that. I feel better, thank you, then I feel good, like I did something positive. And it's true that the sort of the means justifies the end. I do want them, and I do want the strokes that I get from feeling that I've contributed. But often getting them there, or helping to get them there, involves disabusing them of something, or contradicting them in some way. Not supporting them for some reason, on some reason. And I tell people, you pay me to say stupid shit. I can say anything. And sometimes I say things just to trigger you or to get a reaction. Especially so if you're not honest. And that honesty has many levels, right? But I've started to learn that the nicest people tend to be not as honest as they present themselves, because they're concerned with being nice and making you think they're nice, and they will orient themselves toward what makes you feel they are nice rather than the unvarnished truth. So they can actually have quite a bit of conflict and anger that they don't want to show. And so, here I am trying to pull out from them the truth. They may not like that. I'm pulling out the truth. So it ends up, I can't really decide what helping another person means. I just have to sort of wing it and be intuitive. And I try to keep in mind, what was their problem again? What was the goal here? And I'll often ask them, well, what do you really mean by this existential concept of yours? Honesty, love, success, self-love, confidence. I mean, what do you mean by that? Approval? Recognition? Reward? So I'm just poking. And so you say, how do you go from physics to that? Well, I guess one of the answers is you realize that science isn't all that objective to begin with. And if those people aren't being honest and fair, maybe the results of their work aren't so honest or fair either. So that you have to kind of look at who you're listening to, not just whether their mathematics make sense. So that's what kind of led me to, pull back the curtain on the whole objective science thing and say, well, what is your real motivation here? Because a lot of physicists and great scientists have been very disappointed in themselves. They've not been confident people. They've not felt good about their work. And that's sort of amazing. You think, oh, you did such amazing work. Why do you feel that way about yourself? But it's because they never really, came to terms with their own personalities. So it comes into focus as a whole big thing. I'm trying to pull the end to the beginning. You can't ignore both ends. There is a reasonable point of view and a rational approach to things. But underneath it, there's your emotional needs as a person. And you got to take care. You got to see both.
And so as you're thinking, or as I'm thinking about this, I've heard you in other shows and talks, you've talked about brain training. And I'm now curious as to how brain training works with counseling and kind of the approach you use, because to go back to what you mentioned earlier, people come to you with something that that is bothering them, not necessarily knowing how they're going to work on it, or even if they should, it's just bothering them. And during the course maybe of their work with you, you find that it is something that is not, they can't go back and undo it, right? They can't go back and undo their parents. But then how do they move on from the symptom? And I think that's something that, keep teaching the brain to work differently around things like anxiety, as an example, fits in there. So can you talk a little bit about brain training and how that works with counseling?
I have an ambivalent relationship to triangles. If you've ever had a triangular table, you know how difficult it is to know where to put your coffee cup on the thing. But triangles are very useful structurally. It's got a lot of integrity. I mean, they have the fundamental integrity. And conceptually, they feel like the limit of what we can do. 3 things we can conceive of. 4 things gets a little hard. 5 you can't keep up with. So I apply this 3-part approach to psychology, partly because it makes sense, partly because more is too much and less is too little. But the 3 points are your reason, your reasons, your perceptions. That's one. And the second is your emotions, how you feel about things, which we overlook and feel that, we'll be reasonable about things, but we're not. The emotions are rooted deeply. It's like taking dandelions out of your lawn. You're never going to get rid of them all. you're not going to, prevail. And the third thing is the neurology, which is your habitual reactivity to things. And that's what brain training is about. It's about basically relaxing your triggers, which are not entirely emotional or intellectual. They are sort of built into your neurology. Not quite as much as, your patella reflex. But maybe, I don't know. I mean, why do people get attracted or repelled from other types? Politically, socially, sexually, whatever. And why are you triggered by certain comments or attitudes or positions? And maybe you're just like hypervigilant in general, or, anxious, ruminating, or otherwise obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
People don't recognize that a lot of this is built in to their character, or has been built in, or they've learned to build it in to their characters. And it's neurological to an important degree. Not the subject matter, but the reactive nature of their behavior. Why they get upset about these things, not what they get upset about.
Mm.
So I was talking to a friend. I was kind of probing them because they weren't a client. So I was bothering them. They get upset about packing.
Okay.
I mean, this person was a mother and she's got kids, and packing for a trip involves thinking ahead everybody's needs and what everyone's going to forget and what they're going to need when they get there and what they haven't thought of about what they'll need when they... And it causes her to go over the edge and become panicked because she can't figure it all out. And it's going to come to her to resolve it. And she gets distraught. Whenever the issue of packing comes up, she goes into a kind of a tailspin. And you'd say, well, that's reasonable. I'd go into tailspin too if I had too much to worry about. So yes, that's true. But you wouldn't have a panic attack, or you shouldn't have a panic attack. And for this person, as an example, it's a trigger. And it's causing a kind of neurological, biochemical, that's all kind of nonsense. But, some reaction that she can't control.
Right.
And it's sort of changing the reality. And now she feels threatened and out of control and doesn't know what to do next, and paranoid that whatever she does is not going to be enough. And a very uncomfortable position to be in. And how do you get out of that when it seems to be reality? It's like heading at you at an unstoppable velocity. And that's a brain thing. That's not about, you're not going to do, well, you could do deep breathing and you do mindful meditation and you could do, cognitive behavioral therapy. You could do all those things, but ultimately it's still a brain reactive trigger. And the bottom line is, and this is what's hard to convince anybody of, that you can actually just train your brain, having nothing to do with the issue. You can just train yourself to be less reactive. And it's not a thoughtful attitude. It's not an emotional attitude. It's a neurological attitude. It's like a skill, almost a strength. You can change your brainwave patterns to be less frenetic, less jagged, less unstable. And you do that by just ridiculously training your brainwaves in certain ways, in certain frequencies, in certain locations. And it's like ridiculous because it doesn't connect to what you think is who you are or what makes your world go around. But if you could become Mother Teresa, the world would be much better. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but you would be a different person. put it that way. um,
A different person.
and maybe you'd like to be that person, a more tempered and grounded person. So that brain, this is, like I say, the triangle. Like, if you forget that corner of the triangle, you'll always be running around and trying to compensate for your hyperactive, vigilant behavior.
And when you're thinking about training the brain and the changing the brainwave patterns, you can actually measure for that and see brainwave, like the electrodes, and you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
see
hmm
what's happening there. So do you use that as a tool with patients or clients to kind of demonstrate what's different or what's changing, or a way to understand what's happening when they're going through those types of emotions?
Yes and no. Yes, I would do it always. No, I can't afford to do it always.
Mm.
So traditionally, which is to say over the last 30 years, it's been expensive to do because the hardware is expensive and the software is expensive and the training is alternative to what anyone has in psychology. And there's a certain amount of patience, and the clients don't actually get it because it's not targeted to what was on their, to-do list.
Mm.
And they have to spend repetitive they have to spend money repetitively to train themselves in a skill they don't understand why they need.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's fair.
right, so it's starting to happen now that it's becoming affordable. So for what used to cost $5,000 worth of training, you can now get for maybe $1,000,
Oh, wow.
which means you get a little portable do-it-yourself headset for $300, and then you engage in repetitive trainings, $150 a session, which means that I look at your brainwaves and tune the system to react appropriately. And basically, it seems like a meditation. You watch your own brainwaves, although they're presented in a way that's simple, like a red
Hmm.
circle it grows and shrinks, and you're simply told to shrink the red circle down as small as possible. But it's keyed to your, frenetic brainwaves, and as your brainwaves calm down, the red circle gets smaller. And people will ask, "How do I do it?" And I say, "I don't know how you do it. Just do it. It's like riding a bicycle. I can't tell you how to do it. And in fact, if you thought about it too much, it wouldn't help. It has to be a learned skill, like a musical instrument. You can't think about playing a musical instrument. You learn it. I
Yeah.
mean, there are limits to all this, and maybe some people are better than others. But you take the situation, and if it's affordable, maybe you can learn quickly. Maybe you'll learn slowly. When do you see the benefits? Usually quite fast, actually. And that's the promise of it. You get results quickly.
That's pretty cool. It's interesting that to think about that though, because in most situations, I would imagine that there is a very difficult time separating the conscious piece that we're all used to, the cognition, from the subconscious piece that is part of the brainwave experience, right? But so, like in my mind, and I'm greatly simplifying this, of course, but in my mind, you have this section of things that you have control over, you're aware of, you have purpose about, and then you have this underlying piece that you're not necessarily aware of, nor do you know exactly how to access or control it. And the question of, well, how do I make the red circle smaller, is somewhat trapped in that piece that you don't necessarily have awareness about, that you're trying to figure out how to get there to control it. And so it'd be an interesting exercise to do, is to see if you could actually access that and make the circle smaller, and how you feel when you're doing it, and if you remember how you did it, and really change the pattern based on that. That's just a very interesting thing for me.
Let me recast it in a framework that you'd have more to say about. Eyesight is a very interesting thing. Um, some things I know about your eyes are that they are the fastest moving muscle in your body, moving the orbits of your eyes. They react very quickly. Now, I don't know about the speed of changing your eyeball in terms of focusing, but certainly the shifting of your eyeball is very quick.
Very
And
fast, yes.
and there does seem to be, in my unprofessional opinion, a relationship between eyesight and anxiety. So that, well, for instance, when I would go to college and spend 9 months, doing classwork, my eyesight would get bad. And then when the summer would come and I'd spend the whole time out in the wilderness, my eyesight would get good again. And it was clearly an exercise thing of being too myopic about staring at my
Mm-hmm.
books, but it was also a relaxation thing about relieving the tension throughout my body. And so I've come to believe that my eyesight improves when I relax the muscles around my eyes.
Yeah.
So if
Okay.
I'm driving and I'm noticing that I'm having trouble seeing because it's like foggy and dark and rainy, I'll do eye exercises, and I feel my eyesight will improve
Hmm.
immediately. Now, this is not like long term. This is a complicated thing. Um, but again, you could conceivably give somebody a feedback thing where you said, make the red circle smaller and your eyesight will get better by, connecting electrodes around your eyes and measuring some sort of muscular thing.
I see.
And,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't know what you were talking about because they would be so habitually tense. And you can extend this to relaxation in general. Like if I say, Artis, I see your shoulders are too tense. You're holding them too high, which is not the case. But if I saw that, I would
Yeah.
say relax, and you would go ugh, and you would try to do this stuff, and it wouldn't feel natural. And as soon as you stopped trying, you'd go back to wherever you were.
Where it was. Yeah.
But after a while, maybe you'd learn to lower your blood pressure, or improve your vascular flow, or lower your migraine headaches. These are things you don't know how to do voluntarily. But through some change, especially if it's beneficial, you can become habituated to it. So I'm
Mm.
saying, yeah, you could lower your rumination. Maybe you could improve your eyesight. Maybe you could alleviate your lower back pain and lower your blood pressure. And who knows what else? Probably almost anything else that's slightly below consciousness.
That's fair. That's fair, and that actually starts to make sense to me. Then, when we think about hypnotherapy and hypnosis, that is my understanding from talking to other people who are hypnotherapists is that you are able to maybe touch more of the subconscious mind through hypnosis and maybe help the processes along. In that, if there are things that the person is really trying to access or understand so they can move on, that hypnosis may give them more access to their subconscious. You've worked with hypnosis. What are your thoughts, and how does it fit into this brain training piece, or even the counseling piece? When and how do you use it?
Well, my triangle analogy is that emotions support one of the pillars of your personality, your emotions. And you don't know much about where your emotions come from. They're kind of legacy. And you'd like to gain more control over them. I'm not sure control is the right word, but maybe alliance with them.
Mm.
Uh, Appreciation and maybe that's what self-love is, something in there. So the question is, how do you do that? Do you encounter your past trauma? Do you deal with your conflicts? Do you affirm your gratitude, your faith in God, or whatever? it's not really a public discussion. You might start talking about those things to your counselor or closest friend, but how to do more, how to get further into engagement with the things that form your emotions. So, you can have really heart-to-heart conversations, and you can feel sadness and anger and hopelessness and, gratitude and faith. Okay. But how do you do it on command? Like, I need it now. I don't want to, wait for the opportunity to present itself. So this is what I do. I say, imagine the best, or imagine the worst. Imagine the past. Imagine the people who violated you or disappointed you. And then let's start scripting the whole thing, scripting. Let's envision a power animal. Let's envision a saint, or your childhood self, or some defender, or some inspiring role. And now let's have a conversation with that person, either to understand them or to be inspired, supported, or condemned. I don't know, whatever. And let's see where it goes. If you really relax, then you become kind of a witness to your personality. Sort of like in a dream where you don't know what the hell's happening next or why. And you don't think you have any control, but you might actually. And so now let's talk to these characters. That your abusive father. Let's talk to him. And then you'll say, I have nothing to say to him. And I'll say, well, I'll talk to him. I'll ask him these questions. Now, what does he answer to my questions? And this is basically the kind of hypnosis I do, which is not the suggestive. I'm not telling you what to think, although I usually end by telling you to feel good and be happy and, come back next time. But I'm asking you to, this form sort of half daydream, half night dream kind of emotional fantasy that unlocks, hopefully, or introduces you to the feelings that you normally repress, just for the purposes of maintaining decorum and functionality. You're not going to go through life a emotional wreck, though some people might. That's a different problem. So you could say that my efforts in hypnosis are to reduce you to a manageable emotional wreck for the benefits that offers. Better deal with it now than when like I say, most accidents happen because of a confluence of small mistakes. How about let's deal with it? And then if I charge you enough money, you're more likely to do it because, that clock is ticking. Right. It's very funny. Right.
Fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough. So, I love that you talk about the triangles because there are often things in threes. I think you write about learning, healing, and invention. And so that's another three things together. And so it's I never thought about it being too many to have 4, 5, 6, too few to have 1 or 2. So that three is a good way to cover the ground. As people are listening, we've had a lot of conversations over the course of the last several months around mental health and kind of thinking about bettering oneself by understanding some of the things that create you as a person. And so if people are interested in learning more about you and what you do, where should they go or how should they do that?
different levels. I have written a bunch of books. The latest one was called, I don't even remember it. I have to look it up. Hold on. It's not on my tip of my tongue. So the books, let's just see here. There's a list of 10 books. The Operating Manual for Enlightenment was the latest book I wrote. And I basically laid out this triangle approach to lifting yourself up by lifting all three corners. It's not a question of being inspired. It's not a question of thinking straight. It's not simply a question of being less reactive or more relaxed. It's like they all have to work together. You know, you're inspired, you're able, and you're skilled. You know, missing any of those, and it's, you know, the three-legged table tips over, or it never gets upright. So that's the operating manual is that, the three sides. So that's like one place to get the big picture. Then I have a blog, which you also find at my website, mindstrengthbalance.com. The blog is free, but I am broad in the blog. I'm all over the place. Athletics, business, mental health, depression, relationships. So if you want more, then you have to pay to get the weekly blog. But those are like 4-page things as opposed to 150-page book. So that might suit some people. And I guess those are you go to the website, and then the website also talks about neurofeedback, brain training, relationships, and somehow I feel we're not... what you said I liked. I hadn't thought of it myself. The learning, healing, and invention. I mean, I do deal with learning very much, and healing by profession, and invention, sort of. It's sort of how I'm creative. Not satisfied unless I'm being creative. So you'll see that. Well, maybe you won't see that, but it's sort of buried on the website. And I would like to work more with creative people. That's not the give less importance to people who need healing, but I'm kind of a learner, healer, inventor. I want... creative people are odd, right? Because they are a little out of the normal by definition. I find that interesting. It could be problematic. Like I say, a lot of great scientists have been depressed.
Yeah.
And that's not a scientific problem. So I like to understand. And as I say, sometimes it's not very hard to be helpful. A lot of people's problems seem to come down to past experience, family upbringing, failure to be supported and encouraged and nurtured. And I'll digress to say, one of the things you're told that's most important in establishing a therapeutic relationship is the degree to which you trust the person you're working with. Trust or relate or find consonance with. And I disagree. I don't think that's primarily the most important thing in making change with someone's help. I think the most important thing is faith in yourself and valuing what you can accomplish. And most people who come to me, I wouldn't say largely most, but a lot of the people who come to me who feel burdened or depressed don't have a lot of faith in themselves. I don't know if it's because they don't feel enough purpose or meaning in their lives, or they've been undermined in their sense of value. But if you don't have a sense of value in yourself, you're going to always be looking from under the glass ceiling, as it were. And I tell people often, you have to imagine what you want to become. Otherwise, you'll only become what you imagine. And if that's not enough, you're never going to be enough. You can't get there from here. It's, as I was telling a client, it's not a question of small steps. It's a question of metamorphosis. You reimagine yourself above the limitations of your poor personality and weak self-image and lack of value. You just got to dump it. And that, although that seems somewhat maybe inspiring, that seems harder to achieve than almost anything else.
It seems next to impossible, because otherwise people would be able to do that. But I love thinking about imagining what you want to be rather than becoming what you imagine. That's really, really insightful.
And this is why the hypnosis serves a role. Like, okay, I understand your problems, but now imagine someone else. Imagine your guide, your inspiration, your role model, the one you never had, and let them lead you, because ultimately that's the voice you want in your head. The angel on the other shoulder. You had enough of the devil on one side. Now, create the angel, even if you can't feel you are that person yet. At least listen to them. Give them imagine some reality. And so that you can do. It may seem unachievable, but that doesn't matter. As long as they're there, and imagine them far away, imagine them vague, some silhouette or, hazy blue cloud speaking to you, a burning bush. Well, that's a good one, right?
That's a good one.
It's got to come from somewhere, even if it's not inside you right now. It's still, if in your imagination, got some roots inside you. So build on that.
That's absolutely amazing. I got to thank you for spending the time with me today.
Well, you're welcome.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I think we touched on a lot of things, and I'll be sure to link the things that you mentioned, the blog, the books, and the website in the description.
Thank you.
So people have an easier time finding things. That way, if they're driving along, they don't have to stop to look. But really, truly appreciate everything, and thank you for the work that you do. I think it's really important, and people really are going to resonate. This is going to resonate with a lot of people.
Oh, wonderful. Good.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show, because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff, so go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.